Hello friends, and welcome to another Sunday talk from Sunburst Sanctuary. My name is David, and the topic today is honesty. I'd like to read from the quote that we have at the top of the sheet. Honesty within and without creates positive karma. Above all else, to thine own self be true. This was a quote by Norman Paulson, the founder of Sunburst. And you'll see, if you watch these videos week in and week out, or if you attend Sunday services here in the past or in the future, once we get going again, that every month there is a theme that we have for one of the Sunday talks, and it's the virtue of that month. Each month has an astrological sign, and going along with that astrological sign is a vibration or a virtue that we celebrate. This month is the month of Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, and Mercury is the planet of communication. And the virtue of Gemini, of this vibration that we're in now, is honesty. And it's interesting when you think about this, because for some people, I think that the idea that a virtue is attached to an astrological sign might seem kind of odd or at least unfamiliar. And even the idea that astrology has any bearing in our lives might sound peculiar to some people as well. And it doesn't really matter if we embrace these ideas or don't embrace these ideas, because in the end, we're all very similar to one another, and everybody's just trying different things to figure out what works well for them in this life. So astrology, while it is maybe not a proven science, for some people definitely seems like a science. For others, it might just be an interesting thing to look into or to try to understand a little bit. We are always trying to understand things in life, and with things like astrology, if we understand what the ruling planet of a particular sign is, or what the virtue is, it's all just information, and it's really can become just heady information that we have. The key, when you have a path of mindfulness, is to try to take these understandings that we have, these intellectual ideas, and incorporate them into our hearts. And when I think about the virtue of honesty, the thing that really comes to the surface for me is the idea of trust. Because it's through honesty with one another and with ourselves that we build deep trust. And we can't really build deep trust with one another unless we have developed trust within ourselves. And we develop trust within ourselves by making and keeping promises to ourselves. And then once we've done that, and we've established a record within ourselves of being able to actually trust that we're going to keep our own word to ourselves, then we can keep our word with others, and we can begin to build trusting relationships. When I think about honesty and I think about trust, when I think about honesty, it's like it is an idea that I have in my head, that to be honest. But when I think about trust, it really does seem to center more in my heart. Because I know that when I have a trusting relationship with someone, there's a connection that happens. And through that connection and through that honesty that we have with one another, we begin to build this deep trust. And trust is it's probably one of the most undervalued and possibly underestimated ideas that we walk around with each day. Because if we really think about it, when we have deep trust with one another, then everything goes much smoother. When trust is low, then our ability to get things done is low because we're always questioning one another's motives. When trust is high, we find that we have the ability to move through things quickly and to be very effective and very efficient. There's actually a saying that I heard years ago: nothing is as fast as the speed of trust. And I've found that it's really true in my life. And I enjoy working with people that have a good understanding with me and I with them, and we're able to just not second guess each other's motives or whatever, but just move forward and get things done. And this really comes from the virtue of honesty. Years ago, I was introduced to the writings of Stephen Covey, whose most famous book was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks a lot about the importance of interpersonal relationships and how really all great organizations are founded on those principles of that people trust each other and are working together towards a common goal that everyone understands and is in alignment with. And he coined a phrase, the emotional bank account. And it's also been called the trust account. And it's not unlike a regular bank account in that if you have the kind of a relationship with somebody where your bank account is full, and that means that you've made many deposits into that person's emotional bank account by making promises to them and following through on them and keeping your word and being there when they need somebody to listen to them. And you develop this deep emotional connection with that person. You might have it with your spouse, you might have it with your family members, your friends. You might feel like you have it with your pet, which they're the best listeners ever. They don't seem to talk back. But they are always there to be your friend if you need one. And so this idea of an emotional bank account, in that it is like a regular bank account, that you can also violate the trust of an emotional bank account by making withdrawals that you don't really have the trust in the account to cover. And you can have a really deep, long-term emotional relationship with somebody and have a deep trust account with them. But if you do something that's just really violates that trust and take too big of a withdrawal, it can hurt that relationship. So the idea is just to be always aware of what we're doing and saying with each other and how we're trying to treat each other with the same kind of kindness that we would like to be treated with. So honesty is a virtue, and you'll see as we go through these next few months that there'll be other virtues that are talked about each month. Virtue, I think another word for virtue or definitely an attribute of virtue is just goodness. It's just goodness that we have within us that is rising to the surface. And virtue is a kind of thing that cannot really be invented. It's something that starts to rise up within an individual when they start trying to live a a life that has value on a deep level. When they start trying to practice the golden rule of doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. And a really good way to develop this kind of virtue and this kind of goodness within us is to have a daily practice of meditation, to have things that we're involved in, maybe certain mindful practices that help remind us of our true nature, of who we really are deep inside. So honesty comes to the surface from within us. It's not necessarily that we think outside of ourselves of how can I manipulate my thinking process to become more honest. Honesty rises up from within our hearts and manifests through our minds, like all virtue does. When we think about being true to ourselves and being honest with ourselves and having the level of self-introspection to really analyze our own nature, it can be quite challenging because we are so involved in the way that we are every day that it's hard for us to always see ourselves, maybe especially how other people might see us. But this is something that can be done. It takes practice and it takes a desire to want to improve upon our own consciousness. And in life, there seems to be an evolution of consciousness that is taking place on this planet. We have been shown by the great teachers down through the ages that we can have an impact on our own consciousness through the paths that we choose in life. And it's important for everyone to understand that this is not just for some people. It's available to all people. Every person is valuable beyond description, really. We have intrinsic value in that we all come from the same source. We come with the same intelligence that Jesus was brought here with, that Buddha came with, that all of the great teachers, men and women, some we know, some we don't know, have all come, and they have their message is all the same. This evolution of consciousness, this divine awakening, this pearl of great price, this ultimate goal of understanding is available for each person. And we find it through our spiritual disciplines, and we find it when we can apply the devotion of our hearts into our spiritual disciplines. That there is an element almost of emotion that is involved in our quest for higher learning and deeper awakening. And devotion really is a wonderful thing if we can tap into it, tap into this desire within our heart to awaken, and then couple that with the understanding that we can get through our mind of the different concepts and precepts that the teachers have brought to us. So virtue and honesty this month, these are pathways to that inner awakening and we find them beginning to wake up within us as we go along the path. When Stephen Covey was doing his research on interpersonal relationships, he went back and he studied the success literature of the United States of America, all the way back to 1776. And he read the different things from those times going forward that were being written about how to be successful. And what he noticed was that right around, just after the First World War, like about 100 years ago now, that the literature started to shift. And it started to shift from what he called a character ethic to a personality ethic. And the character ethic in the first 150 years of the country, the success was built on things like personal integrity and compassion and charity and humility. And these were important values that were being embraced within the literature of those times. But around the 1920s and going forward, after maybe the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, that era, the literature, a lot of the literature started to go into this other direction, which he called the personality ethic. And it had more to do with how to develop our personalities in a way that we could get for ourselves what we wanted. It had a really different feel from the original character ethic. And so a lot of the literature going forward from that point didn't have the same, I guess the word I would use today would be the same virtuous quality to it as the stuff coming afterwards. And he realized that it is important to know how to behave and to have a good personality and to be able to get the things across that you want to communicate so that you can be effective. But if it turns into, it's just the goal to have techniques that will help you manipulate those around you in order to get the things that you want, but really at the cost of others, well, that is a certain level of deceit or dishonesty that can be very harmful and disruptive to a society. And we can see this in our own personal lives, that when we really are coming from our hearts, when we're trying to connect with people and get things done in cooperation with people and not trying to ramrod our own ideas down other people's throats, that there's a whole different feel to it. There's this feeling of connection and this feeling of cooperation that is, I guess, it would be, I would consider that virtue in action. It's showing that we can work together, that our interests are all really the same, and that is to serve a higher purpose. And we can do that when we join together and cooperate with one another and not try to technique each other into our own way of looking at things. So this really goes to the self introspection that we're all faced with, like how honest am I really being with myself? Every day when I go through life and I'm doing things, am I doing things that are geared toward just fulfilling my own desires? Am I gearing them towards things that support self-consciousness, this consciousness of separation? Or am I doing things that help support cooperation with others and support an expanding consciousness that we could call Christ consciousness or God consciousness? Things that bring to mind our true unity, who we really are, what we really came here to do, and how we each play a part in the evolution of consciousness here on the planet. And it starts right here within each one of us and our ability to have complete honesty with ourselves and what our motivations are every day. We're going to have a short meditation period now, and we'll have a song afterwards that everyone can listen to. As we go into our meditation, the thing I would like to say briefly today is that meditation is just simply sitting quietly and watching our breath. You may have heard the term conscious breathing. Well, meditation is just quiet, conscious breathing. And if we watch our inhalation and we watch our exhalation, there's something that happens as we do that. The breath starts to naturally elongate, and we find that we have a nice rhythmic breathing. And there's a pause that happens between the breaths. And through that process, something kind of magical starts to happen. We start to tune in to our inner soul, and we start to become aware of things within us that we have not maybe had the time or taken the time to examine and to be aware of in the past. So let's take our time now together and just breathe nice and steady, and we don't have to force your breath. If you find that you're taking deeper breaths, that's okay. If you're taking shallower breaths, that's okay. It's good to get your diaphragm involved in your breathing, like let your belly expand so that you're not just doing chest breathing. And really just follow your breath. Watch your breath going in and watch your breath going out. And if you're doing that, then you're having conscious breathing and you are practicing meditation. Thank you.
Oh, listen to life's sweet song. Can't you hear how she longs for perfection like in days that are gone? So sweet and oh, so sad. So sweet and oh, so sad. Father, you're melting us all into one, bright shining blazing sun. And we've all had the blues much too long, so we're all going back home to you. Oh, big wheels are turning round all around us without a sound, and they're spinning within us too. Oh, I can feel the love, can't you? Oh, I can feel the love, can't you? Father, you're melting us all into one, bright shining blazing sun. And we've all had the blues much too long, so we're all going back home to you. I'm going home to the sea of love, yes, of love. Won't you come on along with me and ride the stars above, and ride the stars above. Father, you're melting us all into one, bright shining blazing sun. And we've all had the blues much too long, so we're all going back home to you. Yes, we've all